But I thought about doing a rebuttal before Kyle's other rebuttal about ARI taking PPP money. But then also, Yaron Brook already touched upon a lot of what I was going to say, so I feel like it's just redundant. I try not to do topics that other people that I watch talk about, but it happens.
Wolf went on the show Rising, and he spoke about the state of the U.S. economy. Now, I believe Richard Wolff calls himself a Marxian economist.
He does call himself a Marxist economist, and that should be a red flag. Should sound alarmed. Whoa, Marxist economists aren't the Marxists. The Marxist application of politics always results in purges and mass death and class warfare and famine and war. Just no good comes from Marxist politics or Marxist economics. But Kyle, he's still open to their ideas. But Ayn Rand, ARI accepts some PPP loans because they don't want to be martyred. Oh, well, then they're just a bunch of hypocrites. Oh, they're just a bunch of crazy anarchist libertarians. But Marxist Richard Wolff, that's a guy we got to listen to, folks.
And he made an interesting and important point about what's going on. Take a look.
The Federal Reserve has now made a decision about a week ago to start buying corporate bonds in the secondary market. What that effectively means is that the government is backstopping the entire credit apparatus of the United States. It already stands behind most homes through the mortgage systems that we've developed since the 30s, and now it is standing behind all the corporate loans because, in effect, it becomes the banker of last resort. Any idea that the economy is now, quote unquote, a free private enterprise economy is downright silly, as well as ideologically backward. We now have an economic system utterly dependent on the creation of money by our central bank. I could go on, but these are signs of disintegration of one kind of economic system and the transition towards another one. It's not clear exactly where this will end. But as I said to you, this is a level of breakdown that is really impossible for me to find in the prior history of our capitalism, at least since the Civil War.
That is terrifying. That is terrifying. What he's saying is...
So, oddly enough, I think Richard Wolff is right. I know I just trashed him for being a Marxist, and who can listen to this Marxist economist, but he's right. When you have a Federal Reserve that is responsible for regulating banks and interest rates and the money supply, you can't call it a free market. You can't call it laissez-faire. Now, it's been like this since 1914, and now Kyle and Richard Wolff, they're acting like this is a new phenomenon. But I like that they are finally admitting that we don't have laissez-faire capitalism. That it is very, the whole apparatus, so to speak, the whole economy, it's completely, it completely depends on Federal Reserve policy. No matter what the Federal Reserve does, restrict money supply, increase money supply, interest rates up, interest rates down, that's going to send distortions throughout the entire economy. That's going to mess a lot of things up. And you can't call it laissez-faire. But the thing is of course, whenever we have to deal with the pain of what's going on with the Federal Reserve policy in 2020, whenever it comes time, whenever the bubbles burst, and we got to deal with the distortions wherever they pop up, I imagine that goons like Kyle and his intellectual heroes like Marxist economist Richard Wolff, they're going to blame laissez-faire capitalism, just like they did in 2008, right? 2008 was a result of deregulation and too much greed on Wall Street and too much capitalism. No, it was because of Federal Reserve policy and government meddling in housing and finance and mortgages, you goof.
This isn't even analogous to the Great Depression. We've never seen anything this extreme. We've never seen anything that's gone this far. Again, just so everybody understands, real unemployment, the official unemployment rate might be about 15% or so. The actual unemployment rate is over 20%. You know what the official unemployment rate was? And I don't know how they calculated it. I think they calculated it differently back then. But the official unemployment...
Official, unofficial? Yeah, I know, like, there's this weird way in which it's counted. Like, they don't factor in people who don't participate in the workforce. Like, how can you even take unemployment numbers seriously? And, yeah, it's true that people on all sides of the political spectrum, they pick and choose when they want to trust whatever unemployment statistics. you see MAGAs and conservatives doing with Trump. But when Obama was doing it, when they were claiming record low unemployment, decreasing unemployment under Obama, then a lot of these conservatives, they sounded like Austrian economists. Well, you're not factoring in the people who are not actively participating in the labor market. How can you? And then as soon as Trump takes over, man, look at this record low unemployment.
Rate at the height.
No shortage of dishonest hacks.
The Great Depression was about 24%. So we're in Great Depression territory. I told you guys, the former record for unemployment claims filed in a week was about 650,000 or just under 700,000 unemployment claims. We've broken that every week since the start of the pandemic. In fact, one week it was 1 million unemployment claims, and they were celebrating it on TV, and the politicians were celebrating it. Oh, thank God, we thought it was going to be another 4 million. It was only 1 million. So they were celebrating the number of unemployment claims being higher than the height of the Great Recession, which was no cakewalk. Oh, we're in trouble.
And he's right. Yeah, we are in trouble.
So,
but it's because we don't have enough capitalism. We don't. There isn't enough freedom in the economy, especially when it comes to currency and finance.
He's saying this is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this. So let's walk through.
Which I guess you could say, yeah, the Fed hasn't really done things this reckless ever, maybe. But it's not new.
Some of his points here. He says, well, the Federal Reserve is effectively backstopping corporate debt and the entire credit apparatus of the United States. And he goes on to say it's, quote, downright silly to say we're a laissez-faire, free market capitalist system.
It's silly to call it laissez-faire capitalism. But then again, when there's when bad stuff happens in the next 2 to 10 years because of what's going on now, when it comes time to pay the piper, I guarantee Kyle's going to come back and blame it on capitalism and deregulation and all that stuff.
At this point. Why? Because of that. Because we are, the Federal Reserve, central bank, is backstopping corporate debt and the entire credit apparatus of the United States. So without that there. Now, what's the laissez-faire approach? A true libertarian anarcho-capitalist would say, oh.
Again, so earlier, he made a package deal out of Ayn Rand and anarcho-capitalism and libertarianism. That's the only voice for free markets, apparently.
First of all, they don't even want a central bank. So the central bank wouldn't even exist under their ideal scenario. But at the very least, they'd say, oh, no, like, they shouldn't be doing that. Let everything fail. And then everybody would have to pull themselves.
Yeah, first, you'd have to let things fail. And then you'd have to transition out of the Federal Reserve System, which I'm not sure you can really do overnight. I actually asked Yaron Brook this in a super chat a few episodes ago, and he went on. He explained how you could do it, how you can transition out of the Federal Reserve fiat monetary system into a more laissez-faire system, which I thought he gave a pretty good answer. I'm not smart enough to figure that out. But yeah, you would free it up, and let capitalism run amok.
Themselves up by their bootstraps, but you effectively have a total collapse of the economy and society in a situation like that, complete and utter collapse. So it is good in a sense that the Federal Reserve is backstopping effectively the economy and
so it's good.
Credit apparatus of the United States. But, and this goes to a point that Jon Stewart actually just made on Joe Rogan's show when talking about the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, we had an opportunity to, instead of backstopping or bailing out the systems that screwed us, you could have just bailed out the people.
Just bailed out the people.
But they didn't do that.
You notice how people like Kyle, when they talk about the financial crisis, it's all the bank's fault, right? It's not the politicians, it's not the bureaucrats at the Federal Reserve and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and all these other wonderful institutions that really helped, that really caused this problem. They're the root of this problem. Oh, it was all the bankers. Also, it wasn't the people who took out mortgages and borrowed money and bought houses that they couldn't afford to pay for long term. Took out loans that they ultimately could not afford to pay back. Well, then we just call it predatory loans. But yeah, no responsibility. The people who took out loans that they couldn't afford, and this was also illustrated in The Big Short. The fact that a lot of people took out like second and third mortgages, people were buying second and third homes that they couldn't afford because the interest rates were so low that they didn't really have to pay that much right away. And they were just looking to flip them. There was a whole flipping market leading up to the financial crisis of people buying houses on low interest rates, looking to flip them and then sell them at a high price. No. It was just all the banks. We should have bailed out the people because they bear no responsibility whatsoever for what happened leading up to 2008.
That in 2008, when they rushed in and bailed out Wall Street, bailed out the financial...
And yes, Vagar, ANCAP is an anti-concept. I call them ANCRAPs. ANCRAPs. They're anarchist pieces of crap that try to appropriate the term capitalism.
Institutions, they could have just made those mortgages... They could have just paid off those mortgages that were bad.
Yeah, they could have just paid off those mortgages. What wrong could that have caused? That wouldn't have caused any problems. That would not have caused any resentment, right? That wouldn't have encouraged more people to buy homes they couldn't afford. Because hey, if I fall behind on my payments, and maybe the economy will collapse, and then the government will bail me out.
The government could have taxpayer bailed out those mortgages so people didn't get foreclosed on.
Also, the people who had been paying their mortgages, on time and whatnot for years, they wouldn't have made a fuss about it.
Bailed out the people. They didn't do it. They bailed out the corporations instead, and then those people got foreclosed on, and the corporations got away without a scratch. And it's effectively the same thing now.
Well, I'm sure those bailouts came with strings attached.
Like, okay, we're gonna start buying corporate debt. We're gonna backstop the entire credit apparatus.
Now, what is it? You need a government bureaucrat. If you own a bank, you need a government bureaucrat on your board of directors or whatever.
The United States, but people still can't pay the bills. People can't pay the...
I think Chase Bank especially got screwed over by what happened.
Mortgage. People can't pay their rent. And by the way, it's not even just... It's also the landlords. The landlords can't pay it either because the people aren't paying the landlords, so the landlords owe the banks. But it's the banks who are getting saved again, but they're still going to demand the money. So there's no way we get out of this unscathed. There's no way. Because yet again, they're bailing out the system. They're not bailing out the people. Well, what happens when there are no more tricks and the people can't afford anything? Then what? Then the entire system goes belly up. The entire system grounds to a halt. See, this is why, and he goes on to talk a little bit about this, but this is why you need a fundamental restructuring of society. You need,
There we go.
In the Great Depression, we couldn't get out of it until we had a social democrat, FDR, in power, who fundamentally restructured the nature of the economy. Now,
yeah, it was FDR. This notion that, again, the Great Depression was caused by rampant capitalism and greed on the stock market. And then FDR, Herbert Hoover just let it all fail. Oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And then it was FDR who came in and with his brilliant economic planning, he rescued the United States economy. Is that what happened? See that? This is what Yaron Brook touched upon the other day. Not responding to this video, but saying something else. But first off, finance was regulated heading into the Great Depression. We still had a Federal Reserve. Still had somewhat of a regulatory state. And Herbert Hoover tried to intervene in the economy, most notably with the Smoot-Hawley tariff and whatnot. He would sit down with the captains of industry and try to make sure they weren't laying people off and whatnot. And then FDR came in and he made things worse. The economy never recovered under FDR. And there's even a book about this called, I'm going to bring it up here. Here it is. The Great Myths of the Great Depression. And they mentioned at one point, because Kyle's talking about unemployment. Unemployment dropped to 18% in 1935, 14% in 1936, and even lower in 1937. But by 1938, this is the middle of FDR's second term, so he's had, 5-6 years to rescue the American economy at this point. It went way back up. It was back up at 20% as the economy slumped again. The stock market crashed nearly 50% between August 1937 and March 1938. So this notion that FDR came in, even before FDR was elected, I think the book touches upon this at some point, but even the anticipation of FDR's presidency, because the FDR ran on getting America off the gold standard. That alone, because investment was already tight at that point in the United States economy, but just the mere anticipation of going off the gold standard tightened up investment even further. So even before FDR got in office, just the mere anticipation of him being president screwed up the economy. That's how horrible he was. And even if you want to buy this this myth that World War II, yeah, I guess numbers-wise, you can say World War II rescued America from the Great Depression because people were getting jobs and whatnot. But that's just broken window fallacy nonsense. Yeah, let's just blow up half the world, and then the United States economy will be the only industrialized nation in the world whose factories didn't get reduced to rubble. Yeah, that's just wonderful for an economy, right, guys? I think I remember learning in broadcasting school that World War II actually delayed technology like the advent of the television, because apparently the technology was ready for television in the late 30s and early 40s. But then because of World War II, the government started rationing resources for the war effort. And so the people that would have made TVs, television sets, and probably other stuff, probably apply to this other technology that came out in the 40s and 50s, that was stalled off for the war effort.
Now, there are, far leftists, communists, who will say, no, he saved capitalism, so they don't like FDR because they think, he put into place the measures that saved capitalism. But there's no question about whether or not what he did ended up helping your average person. I mean, apart from, of course, the atrocious race policies.
Yeah, Kyle. Just sidestep the whole racial consequences of FDR's New Deal policies, which I didn't know until recently. I bought the book, The Color of Law. And again, Yaron Brook talked to the brilliant economist, Yaron Brook. I don't even think he calls himself an economist. But he did a whole video about systemic racism, and he talked about this book, The Color of Law, which I eventually went out and bought. And it talks a lot about how FDR, in order to get a lot of his New Deal policies, his economic policies through Congress, he had to make concessions with and compromise with the white supremacist segregationist Democrats of the Democratic Party. And so they wouldn't sign off on a lot of his bullshit economic policies if they didn't actively discriminate against African Americans, which resulted in redlining. It prevented a lot of black Americans from moving up the economic ladder, so to speak, and the ones who did would be met with violent mobs of white people who did not want black Americans in their neighborhood, which led to state-sanctioned violence because the police wouldn't do anything about it. Just real nasty stuff. And Kyle says, oh, well, FDR's policies, I'm sounding like Dave Rubin, FDR's policies, they helped your average man. The fuck they did. Unemployment got worse. The stock market got worse. And especially if you weren't white, life got a lot worse. It was impossible for you to move up. But yeah, Kyle likes you to think that FDR is wonderful regulatory and government intervention policies, especially in banking. They helped out your average person. Yeah, right.
Doing the New Deal, setting up a social safety net.
Social safety net
absolutely had the effect of redistributing wealth back to the people. And we weren't able to get back to some semblance of normalcy until you had what was functionally a bailout of the people. And then, of course, we had World War II, which led to tremendous stimulus and spending, again, on the people.
Of course, yeah, especially FDIC helps, I know it's presented as this insurance package for depositors, but ultimately it's a bank bailout too, right? Wasn't that the justification for the bailouts? Like, oh, if we let these banks go belly up, then a lot of people with mortgages in these banks, they're going to lose their houses and all this nonsense. A lot of businesses that are relying on these banks, they're going to be suffering. As he say,
people by and large, because everybody needed to get the jobs in the factories to build the goods for the war. And so it took the New Deal and World War II, giant stimulus projects that went to the people.
Took the New Deal and World War II.
That ended up leading to the recovery. Now,
isn't war just great, you guys? It really boosts the economy.
It's like in 2008, except now it's worse because it's a bigger crisis. All the bailout money is going towards the corporations, corporate debt, and the people are getting hosed. And so his point is, effectively, it's the same point that Bernie Sanders makes when Bernie says, we're not a free market, laissez-faire capitalist country. We are a socialist country, but what we do is socialism for the rich. We do socialism for the corporations. So we're very different in the sense that it's not socialism for the people.
Of course, yeah, there's no welfare programs or wealth redistribution schemes for the poor, like SNAP and WIC and public education and all the other Medicaid that's geared toward helping poorer Americans. But I would say it's both. You get socialism for the rich and the corporations, and then you get socialism for the poor. You got a mixed economy. What can I say? But I'm glad that Kyle and his hero Richard Wolff are honest to say that America is not a laissez-faire capitalist country. We are a mixed economy. So next time there is a crisis, because all of this spending, this ridiculous spending, and all these lockdowns are going to cause a lot of problems down the road. And Kyle's not going to be able to blame it on capitalism, is he?